Thank you, Martin, and thank you for inviting me to write a foreword for this book. I'm not sure if every Siddur needs a foreword, although there's a great tradition of like commentary in Siddurim, where different scholars will add different perspectives, and so I think it was really nice to be able to contribute some aspect of that tradition of scholarship. Adding commentary in the margins of the Siddur. And my background is as a singer and as a scientist, and so I very much bring my own language to this. And cite some influences on me. There was many years ago I read Alain de Botton's Religion for Atheists, which is a fun book. Alain de Botton himself is Jewish and secular, although it's not a particularly Jewish book, although he refers to some Jewish practice there. But he makes a very good argument that in the pursuit of of secular values and the development of secular humanism, we maybe had a tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater, in that there's much focus on what we believe and an emphasis on religion as a belief system. And actually, I'm not sure if it really is. I think religion is much more about the practices and the things that we do, together and for ourselves. And this is very much, something that anthropologists and psychologists like Durkheim, Dunbar, and Vessier, who I cite there, have noted throughout history that actually, ritual is a means to an end of bringing people together, and it's something that we do together, and has tremendously powerful sort of social bonding effects. It creates social cohesion through coming together and singing. Um, and a lot of my own research has been about the social bonding effects of song and the evolutionary significance of that. In my research, studying the evolution of human social behavior and social cognition. And so one thing that I really love about this Siddur is that I think really for the first time we have, texts that sort of say what we mean so that we can mean what we say, as humanistic Jews like to do, but that they don't neglect tradition, and that the traditional melodies can be sung. There is something familiar there, something that feels very Jewish about singing the tefillot in this book, um, and that we still can rest on that musical tradition that is part of our heritage, while still being true to our values in the words that we're singing. And so I think that's, as a musical text, I think it is really valuable, and I don't think anyone has done it quite like Martin has. Um, so I hope you enjoy, I hope you enjoy like the words and speaking them, but also the fact that there is a melody that goes to them. And in most cases, traditionally, we worked quite hard to make sure that in most cases the traditional melodies would fit the texts. At least, maybe with a bit of finagling around the edges, but at least mostly they would. I think it's a tremendous achievement. And I'm sure Martin will talk more about the
Yeah,
Siddur itself.
I will do. Thank you. I just wanted to say you've alluded to the fact that we've worked on it together, and we've also test driven it and done more than test driven it. Now it's actually been used a few times in practice, in the wild, let's say. Um, how did that go for you? What was it like working on it?
I mean, it's been really fun. At times, it's put me out of my comfort zone, and it has been frustrating for myself in that I wish I was, maybe I had a better knowledge of tradition as well. That I'm always learning. You really need to understand how a melody works in order to fit it to different texts. So I've learned a lot through that process. Um, and it's funny now having sort of performed, having sung through it a few times, I'm finding myself forgetting the original text that I knew to some of these melodies. Like, I mean, actually, I think maybe the version of Naseh Shalom that we
Mm.
use is perhaps someone else's text. Is it? You've adapted it a little bit, but I think it's
I've
already what.
adapted it a little bit, yeah. Mm.
It has been sort of adapted previously to a more secular version. I honestly couldn't remember what the original was. I've sung too many different versions of Naseh Shalom, or Oseh Shalom, I think, as it used to be.
Yeah,
And I think the same is true for many of these texts now. So I think it's fascinating how yeah, your words have embedded themselves in my practice very
good.
much.
That's good.
Um, but mostly quite seamlessly in that, it just slips in. Yeah, and I think there's something magical about being able to do it in person, and we have been able to do this in person a few times, and I think people really have resonated with the texts as they are, and they have been able to follow along. And it's a very important sort of law in Judaism that to have a like there's a quorum requirement. I think this is really quite particular to us that you need to kind of you know pray together in a group of at least 10 people. And I think that's a really important thing that you actually can bring people together to do it, and we have done that now in person a few times. I think with great success.
We
It
have,
makes it
yes.
very accessible. The fact that you don't need to sort of learn new melodies, and there's this tremendous sort of nostalgia that the melodies bring for people. There's something familiar there.
Sure, yeah. When I presented this at Limud last year, somebody said, I gave an example of one of the tefillot, and somebody said, but but that's the same as the original. And I said, no, no, it isn't. And they said, but you just sang it, and it's exactly the same. And I said, uh, where is it the same? And then I was there trying to get it up on the screen, and I looked at the screen, and I was genuinely worried that have I missed something? Have I misspoken or what? And I was looking at the screen and looking at the words, and this person was saying, but it's the same. And then somebody not shouted, but like spoke and said, but that's his point. You think it's the same. It's not the same, but you wouldn't notice, you haven't noticed that it's different. So
Hmm.
that was an important moment actually, that's embedded itself. And then when we were at Limud and we test drove it, um, I don't know if you remember or perhaps you didn't
Hmm.
hear it or what, but two people came up to me at the end and said, "What about remember and keep the Shabbat, Shamor v'Zachor?" And I said, "Sorry, what about it?" And they said, "Well, how do you do that? Like, do you remember and keep it?" And I thought, well, we've just done a Shabbat service. Like, yes, I do remember and keep it. And remembering and keeping it looks different to different people, but this is why I mentioned it in a previous slide that is it here? Somewhere. Perhaps here. Yes. That in my vision of humanistic Judaism, for spiritual humanistic Judaism, we reconstruct we reconstruct the value and the meaning of traditions like sacred time in Judaism. And so
Hmm.
we can say we remember and keep things like Shabbat, even if
Hmm.
the way that we're remembering it and the way that we're keeping it doesn't fit an orthodox framework, but we're still remembering and keeping it, which I think is something that is distinct from someone who might call themselves a secular humanistic Jew,
Hmm.
for where there isn't this kind of necessary value of remembering and keeping sacred time.
Hmm. True. I think that incident is such a wonderful illustration, actually, of how like actually in Judaism, for many people, practice is more important than belief. And I think there are a lot of sort of traditional Jews who will quite happily kind of sing the songs and never really think about what the text is. The important thing is actually to show up to shul and to sort of to say the line without really contemplating the words, such that if you replace the words entirely, people won't even notice they've changed. So yeah, it's
Exactly.
such a wonderful example.
Yeah, exactly.